It's injury season and spring training. We'll cover that. And Fred Zinkie is going to tell us how to make a perfect auction league. All coming up on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson. He is Fred Zinkie. We're brought to you by Fantrax and, of course, the NFBC and the RotoWire Online Championship. Fred, it is pitcher injury season. Not only just pitchers, but mostly pitchers. It's that time of year, I feel like, where you start to see guys come down with it. Obviously punctuated by Gerrit Cole needing Tommy John surgery.
Yes, I was going to put in our show notes a discussion of how, like, you can just feel the pitchers getting, I don't feel them. I'm experiencing the pitchers getting pushed up. It just happens every year at this time, whether it's Cole or Grayson Rodriguez or George Kirby or Sean Manaea, it just keeps going and going. And what we're seeing, and we do this every year, is in comparison to our February drafts, those aces seem to get pushed up a little bit. And then I also find the late round pitchers that I was getting in, say, rounds like 24 to 30 in February are now getting picked in, say, rounds like 20 to 23. So also we see I think sometimes at this point in the year, maybe certain pitchers who were sleepers, you start to see like, okay, maybe they're not going to get in the rotation. So they start to fall off the wayside. So maybe there's sleepers as well. But yeah, it's definitely, this is the time of year for pitcher injuries and then other pitchers getting pushed up because you got to get some.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start off with Cole though, and just we know, okay, don't draft him, but are you interested in Will Warren? Are you interested in any of the other guys that might emerge? Are you interested in thinking that maybe the Yankees will go out and sign somebody like a Kyle Gibson or a Lance Lynn?
Okay, so lots of questions there. I would start
many. Sorry.
Yeah, starting with
many are asking.
That's okay. Starting with Will Warren. Yeah, sure. Especially when we talked about late round pitchers drying up. Like I did find in my most recent draft, about it's a 15-team league, about round 24, 25. I was like, wait, where are all my usual pitcher targets? Oh wait, they're already gone. Just some guys that used to be getting there, they've just been pushed up. So now you need new pitcher targets late in your draft. And I think Will Warren can definitely be one. Like he could maybe be a strikeout per inning or just a little bit less than that. He's going to pitch on a really good team, really good bullpen behind him. Tough division, although the schedule is more balanced than it used to be. If you could get a low 4s ERA out of him in the late rounds, I think he's definitely worth getting. I do see a scenario like the door is wide open for the Yankees and Cardinals. They won't. I don't think it'll happen. But, the Nolan Arenado to the Yankees rumors have floated around all offseason. Now you throw in the Yankees' need for starting pitching on a Cardinals team that has some starting pitching and isn't trying to win this year. Like the concept of Eric Fedde and Nolan Arenado to the Yankees, or Sonny Gray and Nolan Arenado to the Yankees, like they could solve two of the Yankees' problems at once. But I don't think it'll happen. I think it's more likely, like you said, that they'll grab a Lance Lynn and have him behind the other pitchers, but working away and just see where it all goes.
Yeah, I think it won't happen now, at least. I think in small part because the Yankees probably don't want to pay the full freight of the salary. They probably don't want to have that up against the luxury tax. They still think that we're going to make the playoffs regardless. Let's at least optimize a little bit. I think that is probably the mentality that they'll likely have, especially at such a big deal. I think you're right. I think a smaller deal is more likely. A free agent's more likely. Other than having to trade away a prospect as well. Although I'm assuming if they take you on so much contract in the Arenado deal, they'll be able to not give up much of a prospect. So we'll see about that there. I think that's going to be one though. That's going to be that spillover effect. And you're absolutely right though, too, that between Cole, between Grayson Rodriguez, George Kirby, pitchers are getting pushed up, and they always get pushed up later in draft season anyhow. In no small part because of the NFBC and in no small part because of the main event. We saw the first two main events in their draft boards over the weekend. Pitchers did get pushed up compared to like Labor, for instance, there. Where I got Blake Snell in the 4th round and Garrett Crochet in the 3rd, you had to kind of push those up around each for those guys and similar others too. Not just my two guys. I don't want to just make this a pointing out my team. It's more just an issue of like, that's where the cost of pitching is going now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking this morning that I don't know if you saw this earlier in spring training, but over at CBS, Chris Towers did some research earlier in spring training.
I saw that.
Yeah, on the pitchers and how pitchers that maybe by about round 4 or so don't really hold that much of an advantage over pitchers in say rounds like 8, 9, 10 over the past few years. And there's lots of things you could talk about there. You could talk about the evolution of pitching and how some of the aces several years ago were like really, really good, like Kershaw and Scherzer in their prime and things like that. But just if you are believing in his research, and I'm not saying I'm not or anything, it's interesting where the pitchers are getting pushed up, and assuming they've been pushed, we know they get pushed up every year. Like, would it be smart to stay firm and say, no, I'll let them get pushed up. I'm going to grab my pitchers in rounds like 8, 9, 10. I'll let people push these 7th, 8th rounders into rounds 4 and 5 and 6. And, I'll take hitters and I'll pick them up. I'll pick up pitchers later because historically they end up being almost as good or just as good. So, but people don't usually the way it works, people, they start seeing pitchers flying off the board and they're like, I don't have one, or I only have one. Like, I need to get more. I'm doing a slow draft right now over at the NFBC, and I'm in round 6 and I have no pitcher. Well, I have a closer, but I have no starters. And I'm trying to decide, am I going to just jump on starters because I just don't have any starters, or am I going to maybe wait a couple more rounds and then grab a whole bunch of them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's also, one where I'd like to kind of see a little bit more of what happens with that. I think it's interesting also just to kind of see like recent results there too. Like I'm just going to go by 15 round teams and then kind of look at the board. Like, okay, what does that mean if you're waiting till rounds 8, 9, and 10 to grab that second starter, or maybe even, maybe your first, although I would not recommend that. But if you look at that in 15 round leagues, okay, that in 15 team leagues, starting in the 8th round, here are the pitchers according to ADP. I'm just using the graphical board here, and I'm not really sorting by date just because I'm doing it on the fly. But Tyler Glasnow, Sonny Gray, Grayson Rodriguez is in that tier. Obviously, he's going to get pushed down more. Shane McClanahan, Zach Gallen, Justin Steele, Carlos Rodon, Jack Flaherty, Brian Wu, you've got Spencer Strider, Jared Jones. These are the type of pitchers that you're taking over. Let's say that the 2 rounds before, we'll go 6 and 7. We'll say Schwellenbach, Sasaki, Bybee, Castillo, Nola, Ober. I mean, you can see, I can see where I'd prefer the earlier group, but B, not by much. I could see it.
Yeah, I mean, you start looking at, I just pulled up the graphic board as well. You look at some of these, I can make a case for some of these guys, like the 8, 9, 10 guys, like Shane McClanahan was once like a super early round pick. And yeah, the innings might not be huge, but they should be really good. Zach Gallen was once a really early round pick and is still in his prime. Tyler Glasnow has a ceiling, as high as almost any pitcher.
Right.
There's a lot there. You grab one of them. Maybe you could even get 2. Maybe you can pair one of them with Rodon or Steele. And yeah, I could see it. Or maybe you grab one of the pitchers in round 6, 7, maybe who you personally feel really good about. Maybe you're a big Joe Ryan guy for this year, or a good big Bailey Ober guy for this year. And then you wait and grab a couple of them. I don't know. I think in Tout Wars, I wait. So in Tout Wars, our slow draft is still going. It has put the slow in slow draft. Todd Zola's had to prompt us a couple times, but either way, I'm happy with my Tout Wars team, and I took my first starting pitcher in round 7. So I did take Devin Williams in round 4, but I took hitters in 5 of the first 6 rounds, and then I went like Ober, Freddie Peralta, Jared Jones, who I know is maybe not your cup of tea, Robbie Ray, Tanner Houck, Nestor Cortez, like all in the next, say, like 8 or 9 rounds. So like a deep group of starters, but definitely not unless someone emerges from that group. Like I don't have a Zach Wheeler or something like that.
I'm kind of coming around on Jared Jones a little bit. And I hate to say this, but the spring has kind of pushed me back in favor of him a little bit. I say I hate to say this because I'm like, don't overreact to spring training results. But I think we're at a point there where extreme spring training results catch my eye a little bit. And Jared Jones has had a great spring.
Yeah, so I'm not the big driving force on Jared Jones, but my take on him is he was super young last year. He throws really hard. I know really hard means injuries, but it also means effectiveness.
Yeah.
Like he's really, really talented. He was awesome, and then he was hurt. And then when he came back from being hurt, he struggled, but over like a pretty limited amount of time. Like at the time he got hurt, he had an ERA in the threes, great strikeout rate, things like that. So I just wonder if like after he came back from the injury, being out for a while, he just, never really found it late in the season. I don't know. He still in September, he still had a 30-9 strikeout to walk in 26 and 2/3 innings. Like he didn't do well. He had a 5.06 ERA, but like 30-9 strikeout to walk in is pretty good. So yeah, I just think this guy, as far as just talents go, like he's still only 23 years old. He already has shown he can strike batters out. Yeah, like I said, I'm not the the Jared Jones guy, but I'm fine with him at his ADP for sure.
You're a Jared Jones guy, not
That's
the
right.
Jared Jones guy.
That's right.
I'm kind of the Clay Holmes guy, except there's a lot of people are the Clay Holmes guy, but I am making a priority of landing Clay Holmes in a lot of leagues. So I can't say I'm impervious to spring training results. And of course, with Holmes, we got a clear situation where the player's in a different role. We're waiting to see how he does. And I like what I've seen so far from him.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like you said, we don't want to overrate spring training results for sure, but there's just certain players, and we always talk about it every year going into spring training. Like there are always certain players where you have to watch, how things look in spring training. Clay Holmes is someone who's looked really good so far as a starter in spring training, and we do have a better track record. Like I think you've talked about this, and I feel the same way as what I've heard you say. Like we do have to open our eyes more to these relievers turn starters, because between like Seth Lugo and Reynaldo Lopez, and I could add some more to the list. Like pitchers have done that effectively. I felt like the vibe like 3 or 4 years ago in our industry was if someone's going from the bullpen to the rotation, they just won't work. They'll burn out. They won't throw 100 innings. Like they'll get hurt, or their ERA is going to double or whatever. Now, we've seen some guys do it quite effectively. So if the cost in drafts, like we're not taking these guys in the first 10 rounds, but if we're talking about a round 18 pick or something like that, like it is a worthwhile risk.
Indeed. Question in the forum, which is perfect timing because it's going to spring to our next question. Center for Access for Information Justice asks, pretend Bieber was healthy and starting and Dodgers May was healthy and starting. Who would you rather have? And we say that because Dustin May is going to be in the rotation to start the year. Tony Gonsolin hurt himself weightlifting a little bit there, and it's going to be Dustin May as the fifth starter for the Dodgers to begin the season.
Yeah. So I think that Dustin May is big news. Like we've always said all through spring training, anyone who's starting for the Dodgers, we're interested in. We'll see where Dustin May's price goes in drafts, but so far he's the cheapest of all their starters, and there's no reason that he can't start start every fifth game for the start of the year, throw as many innings as some of these guys who are going much earlier than him. So he's been a really effective pitcher. So Dustin May in his career has thrown 191 and 2/3 innings. Most of those have come as a starter, but not all of them, but 191 and 2/3 innings. So basically like a heavy season of work. And he's got a 3.10 ERA and a 105 whip. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but the ratios have been great. I think everyone believes that if you can post great ratios on the Dodgers, you'll get your fair share of wins. To go back to the original question, the what if game, I would still take Shane Bieber just because the strikeout rate is so high. If I knew Shane Bieber was going to be starting during the first trip through Cleveland's rotation, I would take Bieber because the strikeout rate's so high. But I'm definitely in on May. It's hard to say I'm in on May at his ADP because we know his ADP is going to jump several rounds, but jumping back to our Tout Wars draft, he sat forever. So I ended up getting May.
No good.
Way later. I'm just round 30. I got him, and I wasn't the May guy at the time because I kind of thought Gonsolin, just by virtue of maybe experience, would get that last spot. But I was like, in a draft and hold, if I could get 20 starts this year at a May, that would be amazing in round 30. So just getting shares of the Dodgers roster on this.
Amazing. Yes, very good. I as you know, I'm kind of on Dustin May as well. Got him in labor, so I got to make sure I don't go victory just because he's going to start the year in the rotation. Even if he has one really good start, I'm still not sure I can declare victory. But
it'll take a little while on all these guys. So his ADP in the last week in 15 team leagues is 361. So that's a bench pick. He's going to go up. Where do you think he goes up to? Inside the top 300, probably?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too. I think he'll go in that like 275 range. I see some guys like Jeffrey Springs is at 262. I think people would rather have Dustin May now that he's in the Dodgers rotation.
It's funny you say that. Jeffrey Springs just went the last pick that it happened in my TGFBI league at 238. Okay. Now I got to see if Dustin May is available.
Yeah, I see Ranger Suarez around 255. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of Jose Barrios is around 250. I kind of feel like May goes.
I'm looking for a pitcher for my next pick, probably in TGFBI, and I'm still like 10 picks away. So mentioning him is probably going to kill me from trying to get a chance to get him. But with the legions of league mates that are listening to this podcast in live time, no less. But Brandon Pfaadt has dropped like a rock. He's not having a great spring. He, ADP is like 163 or 170. Yet we're at pick 239. He hasn't gone yet. Evaldi is available. Clark Schmidt's available. Would you take Dustin May over any of those guys?
No. I would take Clark Schmidt out of that group. I feel good about him now that there's nothing stopping him now from making 32 starts for the Yankees this year. Right. I mean, injuries could stop him like every pitcher, but there's nothing getting in his way. So I've moved Schmidt up my rankings a fair amount. I always kind of liked him. Like I felt like he pitched pretty well last year. On the Brandon Pfaadt, you made me think of a really good point. So before we started recording today, I spent like an hour. This is what my life is. I spent like an hour before we.
You're definitely on spring break this week, by the way.
I am. So I had extra time. And what did I do with that extra time? I spent an hour going through each team's MLB.com page because almost every team has an article written in the last.
Yeah, the job battle series. Yeah.
Predicting the opening day roster. So all the teams got one of those articles in the middle of February when spring training started, and then they got a new one in the last 24 to 48 hours. There's a few teams who don't have it out yet, but they're all this week. So anyways, the Diamondbacks article does still project Pfaadt to be in the rotation, but the comment in the paragraph was that it's not a sure thing that that Ryan Nelson and Jordan Montgomery are there, and unless those players are traded, like that, it probably is going to come down to a decision at the end of spring training. So that caused me to downgrade. I have Pfaadt. I think I took him in our labor league, but late. He hung around, and I took him like round 17 or something like that. But I don't think I'm going to get any more shares. I got one in labor, sure, whatever. I downgraded his innings projection because one of the things driving Pfaadt in my SGPs was that I had him projected for like 180 innings because he threw a ton of innings last year. And
all the strikeouts that come with that.
Right. Yeah. So he was in like a good mid-tier starting pitcher group for me, just with like a 4 ERA because I had like 180 innings and like 180 strikeouts and then like 11 or 12, I think 12 wins to go along with that. So I downgraded all that just on the chance that he doesn't even make the rotation. And then I'm left with something like, I don't really want to take a guy in round 15, 16, like who I'm going to end up, not even wanting on my roster at the start of the season.
Yeah.
So, and there's at least a chance now.
Yeah.
That's the other one. Jumping back to the Yankees, Jordan Montgomery back to the Yankees would be, if they could work out who pays how much of his remaining salary, would be another one that.
Well, the Diamondbacks, that would be like manna from heaven. They were upset that he exercised his player option, even though they should have known better that he was going to do so.
Of course he was going to do that. Like, why was that? They're not a charity service. Of course he's going to exercise player option. So, but that one would, he was good for the Yankees. That one would be an interesting one too.
Yeah, it would be. All right. A couple more news items and we'll get to the topics of the day. We are spending a lot of, this is fun though. I mean, that's the thing it's not, we're just talking shop, not really necessarily news. Gunnar Henderson though, unsure about opening day. I have him in a few places, including labor. I think I have him like 3 consecutive drafts. I'll tell you this. I'm done getting any exposure to Henderson at cost. He's going to have to be discounted a little bit for me. I think the question is how much of a discount?
That's right. So I was surprised. So I've started 2 slow drafts in the past, like 24 hours, 48 hours. And Henderson, I thought would go later. So he went 8th in one and 7th in the other. So no real discount. I thought Henderson was going to slip a bit. Like I think in one of the drafts, I was 9th and I was trying to decide, am I going to take him or not? And then he went before me. I didn't have to make that decision. Like I was trying to debate him or Mookie Betts. I feel like these guys aren't really picking up on this Henderson news a little bit. Like, I just feel like this is enough to maybe move him behind Betts, maybe behind like Lindor or someone. So he goes maybe a little more late first round. I think he's still a first rounder, but I felt I don't know. I feel like going forward, maybe be more like pick like 12 to 14 instead of where he's been, which is like pick like 5 to 8. but I don't know. Maybe
I
not.
agree with you. I would put him. I would take Soto, Tucker,
Mm-hmm.
Betts,
Mm-hmm.
Carroll, and
Mm-hmm.
Lindor ahead of Henderson now. I'd have to think about it with the pitchers. I probably wouldn't. I still would probably take him ahead of the pitchers. I'd have to think about it with Churio too. I love Churio, but then again, if you're drafting towards the end, you might get both of them. That might be that wouldn't be such a bad result. But I've got him. I've got like an 11 or 12, I think, for Henderson now. I would still take Henderson ahead of Julio. I would take Henderson ahead of Tatis as well. I might be on an island with Tatis. I'm not taking Tatis at cost.
I know. I love where Tatis is going just because he's one more guy who I'm not targeting. Although I do find he's maybe slipped a little bit. Nah, not really.
If Paul Sporer is making the case for him in our podcast. Sorry to interrupt.
A lot of really smart people are fully in on Tatis, which makes me think I'm wrong. But at this point, like, you can only take one guy in the first round. He's just not my guy. So, like, if you like Lindor more than Tatis, and you do, and so do I, then you're out on Tatis, because Tatis goes before Lindor in basically every draft. So what I was going to say is, if you like Lindor now more than Henderson, then you're saying Henderson is more like a wheel guy, like a 1-2 turn, because Lindor seems to always go down there, like 13, 14, 15, like someone around the turn gets him.
Yeah. Yeah. And Lindor, if you're in a Todd Zola league, that's like 9. There's other people that are on Lindor that early too. I feel like he's like the Freddie Freeman of shortstops, a healthy version. You know what you're getting with him every year. He's got that baseline. I complained about Lindor for about 2 months last year, and then he was awesome. So I just need to start my complaining sooner, is what I've learned from that. And not anything about my player evaluation skills. It just means I need to complain more. That's all.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes, that's don't change the player evaluations. Just complain more.
Yep. Rafael Devers is delayed again for his debut. It was going to be last Friday, then it was going to be tomorrow. Now it's going to be upcoming on Saturday. On a related note, they said he's almost certainly going to play the DH role when he does eventually play. No kidding. Alex Bregman has played 0 innings, none at second base. There's no way they're going to choose Devers' defense over Bregman's defense at third base. Bregman will be the third baseman.
Absolutely. Yes. And then, and Devers is going to open the season as the DH. Hopefully it just opens the season well enough to play.
You're right.
Well, like there's a double, concern here. So the one concern with Devers is, like, is he going to be healthy enough on opening day to play? Or are we looking at a season opening IL stint? The other concern is he going to be healthy enough at all early in the season or this season to be successful? Because we're talking about the exact same injury that totally ruined his plate skills, in the last month or so that he did play last year. So
that's a great point.
It's a double. I've been thinking about it, and I know you and Scott talked a little bit about Devers on Sunday night. I'm out on Devers in round 3. He would have to fall to round 4. I'm talking 15-team leagues, so he'd have to fall to round 4 for me to consider him. And then I don't know. I think I'm just not going to bother. I think Devers is like a really good hitter when he's healthy, but he's not going to totally like change my season. Like, he's typically like a 30, 31, 32. He's really good. Homer guy, doesn't steal bases. It's like 275 or something, but like, he's not, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to be like a 30-30 guy or 38 homer. I know he's hit 38 homers once. That's why I said it, but like, he's not probably going to be like a 38 homer, 300 average guy. So I don't know.
It's also that spot where hitting starts to dry up.
Yes.
Like, do you
want to take pitcher spot?
Do you take? Yeah, agreed. But if you do take the pitchers early, then you're. And this is the argument against taking pitchers early. By the way, it's like, okay, do you want C.J. Abrams in the early fourth round? Are you pushing up Teoscar Hernandez or James Wood? How does Devers compare versus those guys for you? I mean, they're different skill sets, obviously, but who would you rather have, basically?
That's right. Yeah, for sure. I just think like Jose Altuve, like I see Jose Altuve as kind of like a nice fourth round value now, in the sense of he's going to have that really nice middle infield and outfield eligibility, right? So like, I think second base and outfield is about as good as it gets for double position eligibility this season. And he's healthy, and I don't know. He's just, I don't know why take Devers over Altuve. Maybe Devers hits 7 more home runs or something like that. I don't know. Like Altuve can probably match him in batting average. He'll steal more bases. Devers drive him more runs. I don't know. I'm not saying that Devers can't be better than Altuve, but Altuve's no slouch. Like, he's good too. I think I would rather, if I wanted to just kind of play it safe, like because there's different thoughts there. Like, you can risk it and go for guys like James Wood.
Yep.
Right? Like, you can risk it and go for CJ Abrams, who we're not really sure. Like, is CJ Abrams on the verge of like getting his head straight and taking another step in his career? Or is he just going to be this kind of inconsistent stat stuffer? You know, I don't know. We'll see. But like, if I'm sitting in round 4 and I'm looking at these guys, like, I think if you want to play it safe, just take Jose Altuve. And if you want to take a risk, I don't know. I don't know if I think I might just be out on Devers. Unless he really falls.
I kind of am too. And part of it is, and it may fall. It may fall enough that I can reassess. Late 4th round, yeah, I might be there. And he might get there too, by the way.
Yep.
You know, he's starting to get mid 4th already in some drafts. So if he drafts a little bit, I'd rather wait a couple more rounds and take Mark Vientos at third base,
right,
and get a different commodity here in the 4th, accounting for the risk that comes with Devers. That's the way I'm looking at that there. You're not going to be able to wait 2 or 3 rounds for Junior Caminero. He'll be gone.
Yeah.
He's Mr. Helium at third base right now.
Yeah, for sure. Although the back injury maybe slows the helium just a bit. But one point I'll make on Devers is if something happens and he doesn't play Saturday, like
yeah, it's already gone a couple times already.
Yeah, there.
You know?
If just thinking about what a big draft weekend this is, like you've got Tet Wars this weekend and a lot of NFBC drafts this weekend, and like if he doesn't play Saturday, if they just say Saturday, he needs a couple more days, it'll be early or middle of next week. Like, watch his draft price just plummet like 2 or 3 more rounds.
I have AL Tout Wars on Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time. My brain will still be recalibrating, so I won't be functioning very well as it is.
I would not want Devers at all in an AL only league, just in the sense of there's no ability to replace him.
Yeah,
if he misses time.
Yep, I agreed. I mean, give me Bregman later for cheaper. Although maybe it won't be cheaper. That's the thing. It's also an OBP league too. Just keep that in mind too. It's a little different of a format there, but yeah, he won't be. But you know he's going to be discounted, and when he's sitting there 17, 18, pause, going once, going twice, 19, then you're stuck with him. You're like, oh, I
will. I guess the other train of thought in an AL only is like, you got to take some risks. Like, you nail a couple of good values in an AL only and your team just takes right off. So if you risk a Devers at a really cheap price, like what would Devers be healthy in an AL only? Like 30, 32 probably. So just off the top of my head. So if you take Devers and get him for 18 and then he does play, even if he's the DH, he does play. Okay. I'm right back in. I'm right back in at that. Yep. 20 on Devers, assuming nothing changes between now and Saturday morning. I'm in 22. I'm in, but I think he'll still go like high 20s because there's just not a ton of hitting talent in an only league.
Yeah, I agree. And I am prone to price enforcing. Sometimes that gets me in trouble though. Because then I get players I don't want. That's the problem with price enforcing.
Yeah.
We got a couple more news notes, but first, quick note. We're sponsored by Fantrax. It is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. All right, Fred, we got some more news and notes, but I'm going to push that back a little bit there. So we did advertise this was an auction special. I want to hit up on some auction notes. We'll circle back to Adolis Garcia and a couple of the other things after, but I want to talk auction leagues. We got Tout Wars coming up this weekend. They are an auction format for the live auctions. We got 4 of them, AL only, 15-team mixed, NL only, and a head-to-head league, a 12-team head-to-head league as well, which is points based. first of all, I love auctions. I want to make, I wouldn't say prefer, but I would say prefer. I do, but I wouldn't want all my leagues to be auctions, but I definitely want many of my leagues to be auctions.
Yeah, I prefer auctions for sure. I would be fine with all of my leagues being auctions, except that I don't know if I don't know how many leagues I could do if that was the case. Like after an auction, you're just like exhausted, right?
Yeah.
Like how many times have you, you draft in the morning in the AL only. I've done the mix a lot at Tout Wars where you go in the mid-afternoon, you start and then you finish around like 7:30 or so. You've been the auctioneer several times, and then I find I just like would, back when we used to go to Foley's, I just like stumbled Foley's, like just your brain's just fried. Like at the end of an auction, 5 hours or whatever it works out to, your brain is just fried. So I don't know how many times I could gear up to do an auction during March. Like I prefer them. I could do 2 or 3. I couldn't do like 7 or 8 of them, I think.
Right.
So
I think so. I think that's right. And the deeper, the harder the auction is, the more fried I am after. That's 100% true. And so like I'm doing AL only Tout Wars on Saturday. I'm doing the 18-team mixed league staff keeper league on Tuesday next week. I've got a home AL only auction the following Sunday. I've done an AL only home league already. That's also a keeper league. It's a bit much, but I love it. I love it at the same time. But I know you don't think it's perfect. There are still ways to improve auctions. So what did you have in mind with this?
Okay, so this is something I've always found with auctions, and I don't know, I've never really framed it to bring it up before, but I'm going to this year. So the reason, I'm not going to ask a rhetorical question right now. I'm just going to tell the answer. So, because I always find that annoying. So the reason that people like auctions, I find, is you get the freedom to build your team how you want. Right. Yep. That's always the selling point. If you want Shohei Ohtani on your team, go get Shohei Ohtani on your team. Spend the $55 or whatever you got to do. Get Ohtani on your team. And sure, you're going to have to pay for it with some of your other players on the roster. But that's always been the selling point behind the auction, is you get to build your team however you want. You're not locked into a draft spot. Because I'm not doing any auctions this year, there are several players really like. I know. Well, if I can't get down to New York, and I will be soon getting back down to New York every year, but if I can't get down to New York and I don't do any auctions, like there are early round players I really liked this year that I'm just not going to have any shares of. I haven't had a back end pick, for example, in a draft yet. So Lindor, for example, anyways, so people like how you can build your team, but there's one limiting factor on that I never really loved. I believe that a better auction format would be, and it doesn't matter how you want, you could add some money to how much everybody gets or not. It doesn't really matter. But I think that you should be able to acquire your entire 30-man roster in the auction. So I think this is a limiting factor. And I'll give you a good example as to why. So let's say I wanted to buy Ronald Acuna this year in my auction. Okay, so I buy Acuna in my auction because he's going to miss a month, and I think the price is good. Maybe it goes for $17 or something like that. And I'm like, oh, that's a good deal, or $20. It's a good deal on Acuna. So now, because of the way most auctions are set up, Acuna has to sit in my starting outfield spot for the remainder of the auction. And then all I can get for my outfielder for the first month of the season is a guy from the reserved round. So in essence, like a round 24 plus pick to be that reserve outfielder. That's the one way where in drafts you actually get more flexibility. So if I wanted to draft Acuna in the 3rd round this year, I could turn around and draft 6 outfielders in the first 18, 19 rounds saying, hey, by the time Acuna is back, one of these guys is going to hurt. I don't be hurt. Like, I like the outfield values. I would like to see a full auction where instead of having the reserve round draft, whether you make it $260 or whether you give everyone $300 or something, but you can pick your entire, whatever your league is, 29 players, 30 players. You can pick that entire roster through the auction. And then you can decide, maybe you want to spend a little more money on your bench hitters or something like that at the expense of your pitchers. But I think that would be like a true auction where you get to pull your whole roster.
Yeah. So my home league, Amaki, does something like that. And we've always done something like that, but we'll take it one step farther. Not only could you spend your entire auction budget on your full roster, but you could also spend your entire auction budget on less than your full roster and then fill in reserves afterward. It's your choice. And we do a couple things differently. First of all, it's AL only, and we grandfathered in the Brewers because they used to be an AL team. So it's an AL only team plus the Brewers. Instead of $260, we go $15 because that's what the entry fee was when we started this league back in college. Okay. And instead of we bid on dime increments instead of $1. So the top player would be like $2.50, and all that. But yeah, if you want to go stars and scrubs, you want to spend, I've seen as few as like 17 players taken in the auction and then having to fill in and we only had 3 reserve spots. So that makes it a little bit easier. So, but some people fill 9-10 spots in the reserve draft, including their reserves and many starters. That usually means catchers, pitchers, maybe a couple other hitting spots, but that's your choice. If you want to do it that way, go for it.
I think I like it. I just think that comparing it to like how a major league team can build their roster, we see major league teams who will put a lot of money some money into their bench, into their depth, and then that pays off. Like what are the Dodgers doing right now? I know the Dodgers are spending like a ridiculous amount of money, but they're not actually spending all this money on like Juan Soto. They have this like insanely deep pitching staff where they're Dustin May in the rotation, and he might be like their 8th starter by October if everybody's healthy.
Right.
So they've done. A major league team gets to choose how they allocate their money. And we see some teams say like, no, we're going to load up the top half of our batting order. The Padres, top half of their batting order is great. Bottom half's terrible. Other teams spread it out more, don't have some of the high price stars, but they're solid all the way through. I think being able to use your bench as part of your auction, I just think it would, one of the times that I feel like you can get good deals in the auction, in a mixed auction, is on injured players, because nobody wants to take them, because then they're locked into your starting lineup for the rest of the auction, and you only can get reserve players to replace them. And I don't think that should necessarily be the way. Like, you should be able to take Acuna or any of these other hitters or pitchers who are going to open the season on the IL, and then you can decide, maybe you want to spend a bunch on pitching, and you're going to grab George Kirby and Grayson Rodriguez at discounts, start them on your IL, but you're going to build a really deep pitching staff. Again, I just want everybody be able to fully control their roster. And that's the one limitation of auctions, where they're actually more restrictive than drafts right now.
For sure. If someone wants to destroy their team by that all injured player plan, go for it there.
It's your team.
You go, you be you, man. And that makes it an 11-team league instead of a 12-team league. I'm in favor of that. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness there, I think I like that. I like that suggestion. Obviously, I've done it in one league. You don't get in, and your auction will go faster too, by the way, because you won't be into that. Where does he qualify at? Oh, right. you filled in that. Now, the problem is you got to make sure you're on top of that, though, in the end game. That every spot is eventually filled. You should have to have a valid active roster by the end of the auction.
Yep.
This isn't, no offense to your employer, but this is not a Yahoo league.
Yeah, I totally agree. Would be my one limitation. Let's say you have $260 is when we get down to dollar days, you have to fill your remaining active lineup spots by the end of the auction. But again, I just think it's, maybe you want to go cheap at catcher, but maybe you want to grab 3 like $2 or $3 catchers and be like, you know what, I'm going to kind of sort these guys out in April. Again, it's just, I don't even know if that's a good plan, but it can be your plan. It's your choice of building the entire roster. Same with picking rookies, like as far as stashing them. Again, you can fit that into a whole plan. It's hard in our auction the way it is right now sometimes to grab rookies, because again, they're going to sit in your lineup, and then you can only use reserve round picks to cover for them. So I think it would be better if there was, like I said, like a truer, and again, it doesn't really matter. You can use $260 still. The guys will just go for a little bit less because you got to buy 7 more of them. You can change it to $300, $280. Doesn't really matter. Everybody will adjust. But I think I'd like to see the auction in like the truest sense, because like I said, I think that is the reason people love auctions, is it gives you the freedom to control who's on your team. Well, let's give them full control of who's on your team.
Absolutely. Let's talk auction strategy a little bit there. Let's talk a little bit about nominations. Do you like a certain way of nominating players? Do you try to get money off the table? Do you try to attack a certain position to define? Do you try to vary your auction strategy, your nomination strategy? What do you do with nominations?
Yeah, so I would say over the years, like, I'll do the standard, like, throw out expensive players that I don't want often just to pull money out. I've often gone very stars and scrubs in auctions. So this year, I would guess that my reaction in the first round would be to throw out Fernando Tatis when it first comes to me as an auction.
Right.
As we've talked about, I probably don't want him, but someone in the room is going to spend $35 on him. Most people are kind of I find at an auction table, first of all, there's a few guys who just won't buy a $35 player. And then second of all, there's some people in there who are like, okay, well, I'll buy one of them, but that's it. Once someone takes Tatis, like, again, it just often eliminates people. I will often buy 3 of them, or, so I'd like to throw out early some of the ones I don't want, pull some people maybe out of the competition when the ones that I do want come around. But I do think throwing injured players out at the beginning can be effective because the room kind of freezes. You're like, oh, do I want to tie up a spot on Grayson Rodriguez or something like that? I don't know. And then maybe you can get a good deal on them.
Yep. I think when there is a commodity that is scarce or that I'm not quite sure how the room's going to value it, I like to throw one of those out and start to define the market. Now, there's some danger in that. You could overvalue a player, and usually it's closers. Let's be honest. But other times, you also run the risk of letting somebody else get someone cheap because it's the first one out. But generally, you get a good idea of, okay, this is what the room is valuing closers at this draft. Okay, fine. Now I know. And that I find that to be handy. It's interesting. There are certain people that will never nominate a player they want until late in the draft, when obviously, the burden of nomination shifts a little bit there and you're trying to fill your roster. There are some people that frequently nominate a player they want. One of the best auction players I ever play against is Larry Schechter. And Larry almost always nominates a guy that he's interested in. It's not exploitable. He stays true to his price. He's good that way. And he's got a great track record. He does fine. So to me, it's a very interesting way of going about this. That maybe it could be just overvaluing the what there is in nominations, for at least when it comes to Larry.
Yeah, I can see. Sometimes what I'll do is maybe halfway or 2/3 through the auction, depends how much money I have left, but let's say it is a reliever and I feel like I need a closer and there's a couple more left that I'm interested in. I might throw out one, try to make an honest attempt to get him. If I get him, great. If I don't get him, at least I know when the other one eventually comes out, like, he's my last shot. Like, I've at least narrowed it down or maybe sometimes maybe there's one closer left and I'm in a situation where I'm thinking, okay, am I going to buy this guy or not? Well, you know what? Let's find out, because if I'm not going to buy him, I'm just going to pivot and I'm going to take that $13 I was going to put on a closer and I'm going to start spreading it out onto starting pitchers or something like that. Because again, and especially if it's a trading league, like, you don't have to come out of your auction with a balanced roster. You want to come out of it with a good roster. So a valuable roster. So I've done that before, where I throw out something I want because I actually just want to know if I'm going to get it or not, because maybe it's, like I said, maybe it's the only reliever I have left at $10 or more. And I'm like, okay, well, I want to know now, because if I'm not getting them, I got a little more money to play with than I expected at some other spots, because I'm not going to spend $13 on the $6 reliever.
That's right.
Because I didn't get the $13 reliever.
That's right. Budgeting wise, I hear a lot of tips like save money for the end game. You want to control the end game. A, do you do that? And B, what does that mean?
Right. Yeah, I would say I don't save that much for the end game. I do like to have the ability to get some $2 players. Definitely. Because if you do get trapped into all $1 players, like, it does let the room really control you. So I do, like I say, like, I do sometimes like to save enough money to just have, like, be able to get some $2 players in the end game. So if I had, like, say when I get to my last 5 players, like, I'd love to have like $8 or $9 for those. Yep. So I can get a 2 or maybe a 3, a couple 2s, a couple of 3, but then eventually settle for 1s, especially in pitching, settle for 1s. But in the hitting, I wouldn't mind being able to get a 2 and a 3, because I do think what you can get in hitting late in the game at $2 or $3 is, like, way better than what you get at $1.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Any other auction tips before we move on to the next topic?
Lots of auction tips. I don't ever get drawn into bidding wars. So I've always been hard and fast on that. Like, I have valuations for every player. I don't need any specific player, especially if it's a trading league. I don't get drawn into bidding wars. I don't have to come out of my draft with Francisco Lindor or something like that. if I can get, I have guys when I go into the auction, and let's be honest, the same guys you've been drafting the most are the guys you're probably going to come out of the auction with, right? So, I mean,
Funny
it's
how
different.
that works.
It's different in Tout Wars because it's an OBP league, but you can guess most, if it was a batting average league, you can guess most players' auction prices based on their ADP because they kind of just go down the list. The pitchers go down the list. Oh, I can throw in another one when you talk about setting the market. One way you can sometimes set the market a little bit is to not throw out the best player at the position, but maybe like the third. So, for example, I could throw out Zach Wheeler early. So Zach Wheeler is not going to be the most expensive starter, but his price is going to kind of set a bar because he's SP3 in basically every draft. So let's say he goes for 28. Well, now we've kind of set a market there where now I know Skeens and Skubal are probably going to go in the low 30s. And because the room's just not going to let them go for what Wheeler went for. And then I know that probably no one else, unless there's a bidding war, will go for 28. So that's one way. You don't always have to set the market by throwing out Paul Skeens or by throwing out Emmanuel Clase. You can set the market by going a little further down, but not much, but a little further down. And then you can set the market that way.
Yeah. Keeper question in an auction league. I'm going to take it. Usually I don't like doing keeper questions here, but it is auction based. Nathan asks, really like Yamamoto, can keep him for 40, but I don't know if that's too high. Do you think a player like Yamamoto would go for 40 or more? I think he'll go for around 40. You know, you have to account for inflation. It depends on how many players you keep. I think people overlook the concept of inflation in auction leagues, but in keeper leagues especially. If you are in a league where you're keeping 10 to 12 players, that ace pitcher is going to go for $40. If you're keeping 3 players, he's not going to go for that much. My general rule of thumb is if you think you can get them back in the auction for the same price, don't keep them. Just get them back, reset the clock. You might get $1 or $2 discount. You may pay $1 or $2 more. You've got but I'd rather have the flexibility than keeping that premium player at the premium price. Try to get them, 7 per team is what Nathan's saying. I think that's probably, my guess is in an NL-only league, he would probably go for no more than 40. I would just toss him back and try to just get him back in the auction. You might get a discount of $1 or $2. You might see somebody else get a discount instead. I don't think it's not a savings. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think I would throw him back as well. Nathan's also just chimed in that it's a 10-team league, so that does also make it more stars and scrubs.
Yeah. But it also means he probably won't go for as much either, though.
Yeah, it's true. So I just looked quickly, and I have Yamamoto ranked 7th among NL starters, which I think is like pretty much like similar to what most people have him. So he's a mid-level ace in an NL-only league. To put it in perspective, like you said, when you get a keeper league and you get some deals, because some people are going to have some young players, some James Woods or something. Oh, I got James Wood for $4 in my NL keeper league, because I've had him stashed for the last couple of years. There's usually situations like that, and then those people have money to burn at the auction table. Right. I think off the top of my head, like not having seen all the values in his league, I would probably throw him back, but it does make sense that he's probably going to go for something in the mid 30s in the auction. And he could go for 40 for sure.
You can calculate what you expect inflation to be. Just you can Google. There's many articles about that. However, just realize it's the underpinning is based on a reliable set of projections and dollar values, 2 different things there. That you start with that as your basis, then you calculate the inflation off of that. My point is it can vary wildly depending on who the people are in the room. It's not exactly a precise measurement. It'll give you an idea of what inflation is going to be at there, but all it takes is 2 crazy people in your league to really blow that up anyhow. But so you can maybe see where a guy is going for more or less on that.
One more point is it does stand to reason if he's the 7th best NL only starter that he'll be the best or maybe 2nd best starter in the auction pool by the time some of them are capped. Maybe there's some who become really expensive. There's going to be people going into your auction saying, I need an ace. Who can I get? And they're going to be looking at Yamamoto or maybe Yamamoto and one or 2 other guys tops. So
And some years, like being in the NL is better than being in the AL, for instance, this year in terms of incoming talent. There's more of it coming into the pool. So that's the other thing you're starting to see a little bit there too is, okay, well, Sasaki's coming into the pool. That's one guy we didn't have last year. There might be others like that. And all of a sudden okay, well, the inflation may not be as bad because there's more guys coming in the pool. Or maybe you're in the AL. You just lost Gerrit Cole for the season. fewer big time free agents went to the AL. They went to the NL, like Juan Soto, for instance, instead, left the AL to the NL. Maybe inflation will be a little harsher on the remaining elite guys, or maybe there's just not as much incoming talent. So these are all things you kind of have to figure in.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. The best thing in any league is if you can just grab last year's and the year before's auction data, and then just take a look. Like if you've had some mid-level aces, just see what they went for. Like when I prepared for all the years I was in the Tout Wars auctions, and when I jump back into Tout Wars auctions, what I'll use to prepare are all of the auction data for my league from like the last 5 years, and average it out and figure out what people typically go for. Like there's nothing better than getting the auction data from your own league.
Exactly right. All right. We are brought to you by the good folks at the NFBC. And we love the NFBC. The NFBC RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Online Championship is live. I've done one of those drafts already. I do it. James Anderson, Clay Link, Scott Genstead, and more from RotoWire do the RotoWire NFBC Beat series. You get a shot at the $150,000 grand prize. You get to play against us. If you beat us, you win a subscription to RotoWire. Or if you're already a subscriber, an extension of your subscription to RotoWire. Sign up for a draft today at rotowire.com/high stakes. That's rotowire.com/high stakes. We're also on the Blue Wire Network. Here are their ads. All right. Thank you for those of you listening on the podcast and listen to the Blue Wire ads, and thanks to Blue Wire for hosting us. I'm Jeff. He's Fred. We're talking auctions. I want to talk about just pitcher inflation a little bit here. It's starting to be that time of year, Fred. We're already dealing with that in our leagues, but it's not just up at the top. It's the secondary pitchers, our targets, the ones that we think that we're going to be at, our guys. They're getting more expensive too.
Yes. I've always found in auctions, it's always gone poorly for me when I've started my rotation with a bunch of like $16, $17, $18 pitchers. I've usually done better in auctions in Tout Wars when I grab an ace and pay whatever the going rate is for an ace. And then I sometimes even two, but then I drop down and get a few pitchers who are less than 15, starters who are less than $15. So if I was going into the auctions this weekend, I would probably be looking at someone like, I don't know if I'd get Skeens or Scooble. Like I'd consider it. I'd see what they cost. If they didn't, I'd probably be looking at someone in the Corbin Burns, Cole Reagans type tier, one of those guys. And then I'd probably drop down and skip a lot of the players in the Yamamoto tier. And again, like we were talking about with drafting, maybe start settling in more around those, like around 8-9 pitchers and get maybe 3 guys in the $11 to $13 range.
Right. I like that. So so the other thing we're looking at is, guys that were late round pitching targets, rounds 21 to 23, and are going 21 to 23 instead of 25 to 27. They're not reserves.
Yeah.
So who are we pushing up instead?
Right. So so I listed here in our notes some pitchers that are now going in the reserve rounds in 15-team leagues. So these guys would be guys who in an auction this weekend you could get in the reserve round. Or maybe you could definitely get all these players for $1 to fill out your staff. And then also if you're doing, main event or NFBC drafts this weekend, who would you be looking to get in the reserve round? One guy who's kind of climbed onto my radar more is Hayden Wesneski. And that's for a couple reasons. One is that a lot of the rookies who I was kind of eyeing in February aren't going to make the rotations. Then also some pitchers like David Festa who were on the outside looking in, but you thought, okay, they'll probably find their way in. Right. So far, we're on March 11th. They have not yet found their way in. Like the latest projection of the Twins roster is still Chris Paddock and Simeon Woods Richardson. So it's not that I don't like Festa, but like I can't carry too many Festas at the start of the year. Hayden Wesneski
let's talk
does
Festa
have a
real
rotation
quick.
spot.
I want to mention Festa real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a lot of Festa. But B, he had a really horrible start against Boston on March 1st. So his overall numbers aren't great, the 10.13 ERA. But, and here's what I'm more concerned with, is 0 homers, 9 Ks, and 1 walk. He gave up a bunch of hits early on. He got BABIP'd a little bit.
Yep.
Some of that's obviously hard contact, but he's not giving up home runs. He's not walking guys. I think you have to look beyond ERA when you're looking at these guys.
Absolutely. If you go to his Fangraphs page and they have the spring training stats there, this is just a fun one. Like I love fun with small sample sizes. He has a 10.13 ERA and a 181 FIP. So, like, that just goes to show you, like you said, he's been BABIP to death so far. He's got a 462 BABIP in spring training and a 30% left on base rate. So just terrible luck with batted balls, and also terrible luck at the times that the batted balls have come across. So I'm not down on Festa at all. It just seems like, again, we know that teams stockpile pitcher depth in preparation for a long season,
and use options when they have them.
Use options, exactly. And Festa's just kind of like Woods Richardson. He isn't great, but he was in the rotation all last season. And then Chris Paddock, like, he's kind of a injury prone veteran. Like, if you're the Twins and you think he's fine right now, like healthy, you're probably not going to mess with him. Like, you're probably just going to leave him on schedule and see how many starts you can get out of him. I still think Festa's got a lot of fantasy value potentially for this season. It's just, like I said, you can only have so many Festas on your opening day. This kind of sounds like open source or something like that, like Festers. Like, you can only have so many Festas on your opening day roster. So that makes me, if I'm looking at him, and then he's moved up. He's in the round like 21, 22, 23, and he doesn't even have a job right now.
So you're saying that, and then I'm feeling very seen right now because I took Festa in the 18th round in labor.
That's fine. But you can only have so many of him. You can't have him, Bubba Chandler, and Quinn Matthews, for example.
No. I followed that up with Jamison Tyon.
Perfect.
Someone. But I took some.
The ball.
Merrill Kelly, another guy that's like gonna have the ball. Of course, I still have I did take Dustin May. I think that might work out. Detmers, Luis Garcia is someone I'm stashing on the IL because we can in that league. Not every league can. You can do that there. Some other names that you listed here on our notes, and I'm just going to read them off, and then you can talk about them individually here because I think that's just the way to go. I like Wesneski, by the way. I think that's one of my favorite ones on this list. Max Meyer, Lucas Giolito coming back from injury, Dustin May, Luis Ortiz from the Cleveland Guardians, Eduardo Rodriguez, Michael Soroka, throwing really hard this spring. Tony Gonsolin, we can probably cross that one off with the news there. At least you're pushing him down a little bit now with the latest news. Will Warren, we mentioned him earlier. Kyle Harrison, Ben Brown, another one that's like a frequent mention on our pod. Across town, the South Side, Sean Burke, Tyler McGill, Andrew Painter, Osvaldo Bido, Tyler Malley, Quinn Matthews, and Trevor Williams are names that you suggested might be guys we're considering in this range.
Well, they're guys who go in that range. Now, Tyler Malley, I believe, left to start or didn't start today. So he had an arm issue today. So scratch him. Already. Here they go, dropping like flies. Scratch Gonsolin, right? He's out. One thing is sleeper pitchers don't always have to be young. So like Eduardo Rodriguez, so far off the radar. But he was like a mid-round pick a couple years ago, who has had some issues and wasn't at his best last season. Like, again, like grabbing someone like him in round 26, he's in a rotation on a team with a winning record. Like, you could grab him in round 26. Like every late round pitcher gamble doesn't have to be Sean Burke. It doesn't have to be Max Meyer, like guys who have never done it and you're hoping could maybe do it. It can be sometimes a guy who has done it. Like the best season of Eduardo Rodriguez was really good. I don't know if he'll get back there, and that's why he's in round 25, 26. But I think someone like him is a possibility. It also depends on balancing. Like, he's someone who maybe has a bit of upside, but at least you have him. Like, at least he'll start. And you can grab, by the way, with David Festas, you mentioned that you took him in labor. Because we have the IL slots in labor, I think it's easier to hold a couple Festas. Maybe to hold a Festa and a Bubba Chandler or something, because you don't have to hold injured players on your bench. So you can hold those guys and still have the rest of your bench for healthy players, streamers, prospective closers, hitters. So I think that in an NFBC, it's harder to hold too many of them. The Michael Soroka one, I think, is interesting, just in the sense of he used to be an interesting pitching prospect. And now the velocity is way up. I could totally see a scenario where Michael Soroka starts really well in April and then gets hurt. Like, we've seen that before with pitchers. The velocity's up. They're doing great. Oh, their arm can't handle this velocity. They get hurt.
Right. Exactly.
But still worth the risk.
Yeah, could be. I just want to bring up, Uncle Ted brought up Jack Kakanowitz and for the Angels.
Yeah.
Having a great spring. Sure. Actually was a low whip guy last year, 119. But here's the thing that holds me back on him. 25 strikeouts in 65 innings last year.
Yep. Can't do it.
I can't do that, especially because we're competing for strikeouts. It's one of the categories we play in. Is there more upside than that? Sure. He throws about 95, 96. Average fastball last year was 95.9. You would think he'd get more Ks with that sort of fastball, but he doesn't. And okay, so he's great. He's a single baller. So he's basically Graham Ashcraft is what I'm getting at here. It's worked for him so far to a point in 11 starts in the bigs. Maybe he starts to improve his secondary stuff, gets a strikeout pitch. I have a hard time drafting players that get no strikeouts. I mean, yes, you get the Miles Michaelis year sometimes. I draft too many of those type of guys. That's something I'm trying to get away from drafting. It may work for you. It's something I'm trying to avoid. So
his strikeout rate is just, in my opinion, is too ridiculously low. Like 3.44 K per nine last year is just like it's too low. So my cutoff usually is at least, it's got to be 7. Like it's got to be 7 K per nine. Andre Pallant on the Cardinals is a good example. Like he's actually okay. Like he had a 3.78 ERA last year. Because he gets oodles of ground balls. His whip is usually not good. It's usually around 1.3 or higher because he gets so many ground balls. He's a bit of a Marcus Stroman or a poor man's Marcus Stroman from Stroman's prime, but kind of Marcus Stroman right now. But his K per nine is always in the 6s. So you look at let's say he throws 6 innings, even 6 innings in a start, he's only getting 4 strikeouts. And if he doesn't get 6 innings, he's probably getting 3 strikeouts. Forget it. I can get a reliever and get 3 or 4 strikeouts and maybe I don't get quite as many as the 8 wins that he got last year, but I'll get way better ratios. So it's just the strikeout rate for me. It's got to be I don't even want it to be in the 7s, but for me to at least even put a pitcher on my draft list in a mixed league, the strikeout rate's got to be in the 7s per 9. And probably has to be 8.
Right. Jared Weaver got away with it, but is also a different era where we didn't need as many Ks to compete. Secondly, he threw 235 innings. No one's throwing 235 innings these days. Hey, you be you go get him. I'm not going to get him. If I miss on that, so be it. But it's going to, the good news is it'll cost you nothing. Kokanowitz and the individual Kokanowitz, I mean, he's barely getting drafted in leagues. I see many leagues where he doesn't get drafted at all. So go nuts, go get him. Round 48 in the NFBC right now in the draft and hold. So that means he's barely getting drafted. He's free, good luck. I hope that works for you because
but the strikeout rate, I think to make him playable, his strikeout rate from last year has to pretty much double. And I just don't know why that would happen. Maybe it goes from 3.44 to 5.44. That's still a big improvement, but it still would make it the worst of any starter on a roster in a mixed league.
Yeah. But hey, that's a reserve pitcher he likes. So be it. Osvaldo Bido for the A's. Now the A's are tricky, right? Because we know that they're playing in a tougher ballpark to pitch in, and their pitching was terrible last year in a good ballpark. Now they're going to a place where the ball's going to fly a little bit more. Bido had a really rough start in his last spring training outing, gave up 4 home runs. Yet last year he had some signs. He had a 109 whip, 60, a strikeout per inning. Still 11 Ks in 7 innings this year, but man, those it looks like it was just one hideous, horrible, awful, no good start that he had. So maybe we could write it off, but there's risk involved with Bido.
The one thing that would make me feel better about the fact that he gave up so many home runs is that the one thing he's been amazing at in his career so far is not giving up home runs. So his homer to 9 rate is 0.55 in 114 career innings, which is outstanding for a starter. So at least the fact he gave up a lot of home runs, maybe he was working on something in spring training. I don't know. Maybe the wind was blowing out. I don't know, but he's never had a problem with home runs. So that's probably not a concern for me. Last year he only threw for the A's 63 and a third innings, but a solid 3.41 ERA. Most of his ERA estimators, if you average out all his ERA estimators, they're in the 3s as well. The park change just worries me with all the Oakland, not Oakland, the Athletics pitchers. It worries me with all the Athletics pitchers. However, at this point in the draft, this is the time to take one. I haven't drafted Jeffrey Springs or Luis Severino because I find that when they go, there's other pitchers I like, but at this point in the draft, I don't think he's a bad guy to grab. He's basically a strikeout per inning pitcher who, I think maybe has a little bit upside. I don't think he's a bad one. And I do think the A's are going to be a little bit better this year.
Yeah.
Not great, but I think they're turning the corner a little bit. He's not like, if I was to rank everyone on this list, Beto's probably not in my top 4 or 5, but he's not in my bottom 4 or 5 either.
I agree with you on the A's, by the way. Their projected win total at sportsbooks last I checked was 71.5, and I like the over on that because I think they're going to score a lot of runs. I still think the run prevention is kind of sketch, but I do think that they are going to score a good amount of runs. We'll see if some of these pitchers take the next step up. San Francisco, Kyle Harrison versus Landon Roop is a job battle right now, and Roop is winning it. Harrison's having a terrible spring. Roop is very interesting. Had to kind of bump up Roop's projection lately. Of course, it could also just be like a Jordan Hicks is out of the rotation too. That's still a possibility as well. And if he's not out of the rotation, he might get hurt at some point in time. I think San Francisco is interesting. There's those guys, and there's even Hayden Birdsong, who's also very interesting to me.
That's who I wanted to mention was Birdsong because he has the best strikeout potential of the group.
Roop might too.
Yeah, Roop does. He's right there. You're right. He's right there with him. Like Birdsong, I have if I'm just looking at his roster resource, a little bit higher strikeout rate, but not much. So I find there are a situation where I totally understand why the Giants would maybe go with like Hicks and Harrison, but the fantasy managers might prefer that he goes with Roop. Maybe Harrison is fine, but maybe goes with Roop and Birdsong. So I think all of those pitchers right now, because they don't have rotation spots and maybe the upside's not crazy high on them, like they're probably all like around 29, 30, like not high on the list for me out of these guys, but I do like them at that point. It's a great park to pitch in, right? As we say every year. And the Giants are going to have a competitive team. They're not going to win the World Series, but they should have a competitive team. I got
to admit, I thought that Harrison had a locked-in job. All right, I took him in labor. I think I may have grabbed him in another league as well. And I have to, this is like Rocky. Oh, he thinks this is a fight. Yeah, I think that it is a fight with Roop and with Birdsong. And, I just thought, okay, Harrison was this touted guy. They're going to give him every chance. He'll keep him in the rotation. Not a guarantee. Not at all a guarantee.
Yeah, the name on the list that probably confuses me the most, so maybe you can help me with this one, is Luis Ortiz. And the reason he confuses me is that I can't find any reason to want to draft Luis Ortiz other than the fact that Cleveland does a terrific job with pitchers, and Cleveland wanted him in the offseason. Like that whole Andres Jimenez, they traded him for Spencer Horwitz. They could have just kept Horwitz and made him their second baseman. He's not a great fielding second baseman, but he can hit and get on base. So they could have just done that. But then they immediately, basically what amounted to it was 2 trades, but it kind of amounted to a 3-team trade. But they quickly flipped him for Ortiz. I look at Ortiz last year. He had a 3.32 ERA, so that's good. But we don't want to look at ERA. All the ERA estimators were in the more like mid 4s.
Yeah, his strikeout rate is 4.24. Yep.
Right. Strikeout rate is poor. So last year it was 19.2%. His K per 9 was 7.1. So that's not good. He had a good whip last year, but that also came with a 243 BABIP. So all of the projection systems for this year don't really look favorably on him. They're looking at high whips and poor ERAs. Again, I don't see any reason that I want Ortiz except that, I don't blindly follow Cleveland at all, but they are one of the organizations where, and this isn't like he's just come up through their system. Like they wanted him from the Pirates in the offseason.
Well, this was a wild offseason for the Guardians. I mean, there was the Jimenez trade where, Horowitz was a pass-through player to go make sure they get Luis Ortiz. And then there was the Josh Naylor trade, who they just gave away, in my opinion. For Slate Ciccone. And you want to talk about, I don't see the case for a type of guy. I see the case less for Ciccone than I do for Ortiz.
Yeah, for sure. I think with Naylor, I guess they're just shedding salary. They're doing what low budget teams do. They got rid of Naylor because they didn't want to pay him. They quickly signed Carlos Santana to replace him. If you want me to make the case for Cleveland, so Josh Naylor is projected over at Fangraphs right now for a 1.9 WAR, and Carlos Santana 1.4 WAR. So they lost half a WAR point. They would say they saved a lot of money. They love Carlos Santana in Cleveland, right? They would say they saved a lot of money to us in fantasy, and to me, the baseball fan, I'm like, what? Like, you downgraded from Josh Naylor to Carlos Santana.
Huge surge in season ticket packages because they re-signed Carlos Santana. Huge. Right. No, winning sells season tickets.
Yes.
That's what sells season tickets. Not bringing back a familiar guy who's 40.
Right. So they've got, and now they've got right now, Gabriel Arias looks like maybe their second baseman. He's a one more player, and I think that's even favorable.
I think
him.
it's gonna be Brito eventually there, by the way.
Eventually, for sure. Yeah. But they shed payroll. They shed payroll with Naylor. They shed payroll with Jimenez. You're right on Cecchoni. I don't see what they wanted. I felt like they were just trying to get rid of Naylor's salary.
Yep, he's in arbitration years. Yep, I get it.
The Horwitz trade, like they had Horwitz, he's not expensive, and he could have been their second baseman. He also could have been their first baseman, and they didn't have to sign Santana. There were lots of ways to play this. He could have been just on their team, like Manzardo's the DH, Santana's the first baseman, Horwitz is some second base, some first base, some DH, like just moves around. Like, to me, he was a piece of fit, but they wanted Ortiz. So, and he went straight into the rotation, which Cecchoni didn't. So, I don't know. Like I said, I can't find a reason to want him, and I haven't drafted Ortiz anywhere yet. But there's just this hanging. I'm like, what does Cleveland see? What do they see in this guy?
Well, Adam Brunchen nailed it here. I highlighted the comment here in the live stream.
Okay.
Sure seems like many teams are shedding money and not extending players. Is a lockout forward looking here? Sure seems like something MLB owners would do. Absolutely, 100% yes. That's what's going to happen. It's the TV deals are dictating this, or the lack of TV deals. That whole Bally's thing falling apart. That's like, and just seeing what all the cord cutters are doing to rights fees for owners. They are losing a revenue source, and I think that is driving. It's not just Cleveland. It's Minnesota. It's St. Louis. It's Seattle. San Diego to a certain extent, although it's complicated there because he also had the primary owner, the principal owner, pass away. And there's a battle for the team on the estate. The Twins, the Pohlad family is trying to sell. Storm is coming, folks. It's going to be ugly. It stinks. I hate it, but this is what's happening. There are teams not spending for a reason, and there are some that always don't spend, like Pittsburgh. And then there's the paste-eating Rockies, whatever. But there's still there's these other teams that are plausibly contending teams doing nothing. Seattle doing nothing is it's really frustrating to see, and that's what's happening there. So you nailed it, Adam. That is what's happening, and that's driving like the Guardians. And the Guardians have always been cheap. I mean, this is not the first year I'm outraged about them being cheap.
Yep, for sure. No, you're right. When you see teams that have like a legitimate chance to turn, so the Seattle one's a really great point. Like Seattle is not Pittsburgh. It is, right? Like, it is not the A's. Seattle has spent at times, and they have this wicked rotation, and then they don't add any hitting in the offseason when it's just sitting there available. Right. You could have grabbed Josh Naylor for not a great pitching prospect. Like you're right. This is coming. We are living the high life right now. I guess we can't have good things for very long. Like we got through COVID, we got through all these rule changes. We've had now like a couple of years of like, we've got this new brand of baseball. I like this new brand of baseball, shorter games, faster games, more base stealing. I like it. And then we'll see if it's, I think it could be as soon as next year. This lockout could be coming, but we'll see.
I think it's post 2026, if I recall correctly.
So maybe it's two more. This season and next season,
but it's going to hang over next season too, and all the carping about the Dodgers and all the carping about the Mets and what they're spending, that it's all related. It's all related. And when the Yankees are whining about it, cry me a river, first of all, because they've had the financial advantage forever. But it's you're seeing lots of it there. I mean, the St. Louis owner, the Cubs owner, the Cubs, over 500 million in revenues, is complaining about it there. And they're laying the groundwork for a labor battle. It's going to be ugly. And I don't want to talk about that anymore. So we're going to move on.
We've already dealt with enough in the last few years in sports.
Exactly. All right. I hate to close on an unhappy note, so we'll close on a happy note. Travis Shaw is going to go with the Cubs to Japan.
Matt Shaw.
Travis Shaw is not.
Travis Shaw he could go.
Yeah. He may go with it anyhow, but yeah.
Yeah, Travis Shaw was a former Cub, wasn't he? He was on the Cubs at one point, I'm pretty sure. Blue Jay, Brewer. No, he was never a Cub. Red Sox, that was the other team. Anyways, Matt Shaw is going to go with the Cubs. I haven't decided if this is really good news or just kind of nice, but because Nico Horner is not going, but then there's optimism that by the American opening day that Nico Horner will be ready. They just aren't going to push him up a week and have him go over there when he can keep rehabbing. So I'm not sure if Shaw's going because Horner isn't ready, and then Horner's ready on opening day and Shaw goes down. It does at least show whether Shaw opens the season on the roster or whether he opens the season in AAA, that he's like, if he opens season in AAA, he's like next. and it doesn't even have to be the third base position. Like another position could open, guys could move around, and he could be next. So this has made me more emboldened. Let's see where Shaw goes in the last week. I have no shares of Shaw because I find people are into him.
Likewise,
217. It's pretty pricey. Pick 217.
I don't think. Yeah, I'd rather wait a couple more rounds and take Cam Smith.
Like that's round 15 in a 15-team league.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He could be. I mean, we're talking about earlier about
Maybe.
not taking those rookies at that price. I don't think I'm going to pay that price. And great spring aside, that's fine. But usually, how often is that against the top starters, top pitchers on a team when a rookie's doing that? A lot of times they're not even doing it against the top pitchers. So yeah, I could be wrong about Shaw, but I think there's plenty others in the range that I could take. And if I get them later, okay, fine.
Yeah, I think he'd have to fall. For example, Jonathan India goes a few picks after him. We've got a guy who's locked in, hitting in front of one of the top whatever hitters and 5 hitters in baseball or whatever, and Bobby Witt Jr. Like locked in leadoff hitter on a decent team, and you can get him instead. Just I know he's not as buzzy as Matt Shaw, but I think at that point in the draft, how about this 10-team league late? I'll take Matt Shaw instead of Jonathan India because there's going to be Jonathan India's on waivers, guys like him on waivers.
Fair.
So
15-teamer and only 15, league, I wouldn't do that. Yep.
15, I wouldn't do it, and a 12, like. I don't. I probably wouldn't. I could see it more defensible in a 12.
Yep, I'd agree with all that.
Yeah.
All right. But Cam Smith note, by the way, they're trying him out in right field. I hope it works out, but I also get some Jordan Walker, Andrew Vaughn vibes too about moving a top prospect out of position. I mean, I've heard about third, heard about first. Now they're talking right field. It's great they want him in the opening day roster, but I sometimes worry about that guys like that they make the team and get switched to a different position as they're learning major league pitching at the same time.
My takeaway on the Cam Smith is I have 1 or 2 shares already of Chas McCormick. He's super cheap in drafts this year because he was so bad last year. But he is a guy who, when you do projections, like if you project him to play most days, he can accumulate really fast. Like in the 2 years ago in 115 games. That's not that many games, 115. Hit 22 homers and 19 steals. So he's just someone where if you project 110, 115 games, you can maybe not 2020, but you can easily project 14, 14, 15, 15. And he gets pretty high up your rankings. This has made me think the Cam Smith thing that they don't really think he's bouncing back from the terrible year. That's what it's made me think. Like we've already sent Altuve to the outfield. So we've already sent one SOS out to the outfield, and now that wasn't enough. Now we're talking about a prospect and maybe putting him in the outfield. And if I'm Chas McCormick or Jake Myers, I'm kind of looking around saying, like, what's wrong? Like Jake Myers at least can play center, so maybe he's safe for now, or maybe McCormick plays by center. But I don't know. I'm kind of if I'm those guys, I'm looking around being like, okay, like they don't really believe in us.
Right. Oh, for sure. And they earn it. You know what? Prove them wrong. If that's
McCormick
how you feel.
McCormick was awful last year. He's 29. Like I said, like his career is one that'll go, I think, really hard one way or the other this year. Like he's either like almost like a non-roster invite type player by next year, or he gets his swing back on track. He's a 2020 player this year. It's kind of just one or the other. The Cam Smith thing makes me think that Houston's not really digging what they're seeing so far.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So anyhow, that is going to wrap up today's show. Thanks for everybody joining, especially those who went through the live stream with us the full time. And those who are listening on the podcast for the full time. We do appreciate everybody. Thanks to our sponsors, Fantrax and the NFBC. Thanks for listening. Take care.